I'm super excited to be here to update everyone on the trajectory and opportunities presented by my favorite topic, Long Miami. Have you guys heard of this concept, Long Miami? It is a concept that I started to put out in the press in the immediate aftermath of the coronavirus, the epidemic. I recognized at that juncture that we're in a very unique time in our nation's history, a time of rapid change where the financial polarities of our nation are shifting, and there's going to be distinct before and after. Many people are redefining where and how they live. There's a wealth and talent migration underway, and South Florida and Miami are on the receiving ends. It is still very much early days. So my goal for this presentation is to have everyone in this room understand and be able to communicate why it is still early days of Long Miami, and how to align, and I want everyone in this room to understand how best to align themselves and their clients with this wealth and talent migration that's coming in, because the press is not getting it right at all. In many cases, because what's happening here is in contradiction with their own identity politics. So example one, this is egregious. This is an egregious misrepresentation of fact. This was a headline in Newsweek that came out a few weeks ago. It says Miami home prices are plunging. They used data from Realtor.com that created an aggregate area of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Pompano Beach, and mentioned listing prices. Listing prices haven't gone down either, so I can't replicate any of these numbers. But the Newsweek headline pretends like this was just Miami data and that values are plunging. Meanwhile, the reality is over here. Single-family home pricing up year over year, up 78% versus pre-COVID. Condo pricing up 2% year over year. This does not match this at all. And this is kind of horrifying how much they've misrepresented our reality. So let's all take a really good look at this, because I expect more of this to be coming from the press. So I'm starting with this to really articulate how important it is for all of us to understand what's happening, because stuff like this is going to keep happening. Next, I like to start this presentation with an Einstein quote. Einstein says that given a solution, right? So our task at hand is to identify why and how Long Miami is in its early days. So we have to find the proper questions to ask. Einstein was a genius, we should listen to him, and also this sets the stage for how I think. I studied theoretical math and physics at Columbia, so I approach things as a logic exercise. We're gonna create a strong logic case for what's happening here, so that, again, that we can communicate it to ourselves and to our clients. Next, what is Long Miami? To me, Long Miami equals Long America. There's this concept that I like, that entrepreneurship flows towards the path of least resistance. America was built on the back of the entrepreneurial spirit. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Serbia. It was Yugoslavia when I was born. And the guys who wanted to sit in the cafe, they're still there. It's the people who wanted to hustle and work, they came to America. And that spirit and that drive is still here. It's just moving away from where it was in the 20th century to new locations, but it does not go away. Next question. Is there still room for growth, and what is driving what we see around us? Data points by themselves are just snapshots in time. I can tell you the median price is this, the average price is that. Unless we identify the momentum cycles and the drivers of change, we can't glean directionality. We can't align ourselves. So we have to really drill down to the fundamental forces of what's happening. So there are three important concepts I would like everyone here to embrace. One is that change is inevitable. The media has serious trouble with this, as do most people. The second is that it's early days and that momentum cycles are real. Things don't just reverse course. In fact, it's the opposite. They build steam and they keep moving. And then three, all of this is actually very positive. This change, while it can seem unsettling, is a positive. We're going to end on that note there. All right, next. What is fueling this? Baseline, it is migration. Migration patterns across our country. We have maps of census data for every year since COVID, and now, of course, we had an article in the Associated Press last week that the state of Florida's population surpassed 23 million for the first time. So the population flow itself has not stopped, and it is important to note that this is not just any population. We're getting taxpayers. And this pattern is very clear. I like to juxtapose these two maps next to each other. One shows marginal tax rates across America, and the other shows arrows of population movement. I'm a political independent. I don't affiliate with any party. My truth is not beholden to anyone. This is a simple observation. States that are high tax, that tend to be blue states, that tended to be high lockdown, are the ones that are hemorrhaging population, and not just any population, but taxpayers. And that's the very significant part, and that's how momentum cycles build. Next, Why is this happening now? Why are all these people leaving these states? Florida always had a tax advantage. That didn't change post-COVID. So what changed? Why this sudden surge? Well, in many ways, COVID accelerated us away from 20th century habits. People are creatures of habit. And you have to think about it. How we live, how we work, all of our modalities of life were established in the 20th century, post-World War II, pre-internet. New York was the capital of the 20th century world. Before that, it was London. There's always a shift. And COVID broke habits long enough for the formation of new ones. What did the 20th century give us? It gave us personal income taxes, and it gave us the 5-day, 40-hour work week, right? That was 1913, the personal income taxes, and then Henry Ford introduced the 5-day work week. These were all habits put in place before the internet, so why should we be trapped by them forever? And now many people are not. This is interesting. Of course, we have IRS data showing that taxpayers are moving, but we also know that people with higher incomes are more likely to avail themselves of the internet for remote work, and that people, look at that divergence, people with college degrees are moving intrastate at a much higher rate than people without college degrees. So again, this is mobility of people who have resources and who can use the internet, and they're leaving high tax states for higher quality of life, more personal freedom, et cetera. So none of this will reverse. Why should it? Why would they go backwards to the way things were? Next, we have all sorts of economic data coming in to prove this point. This was a data point that came in last year. For the first time since this stat has been measured, the 6 fastest growing southern states now account for more of national GDP than the Washington, D.C., New York, Boston corridor. And look at this. We have outflows of tax filers and net adjusted income. Look at those arrows going up, and look at those lines going down. Why would this reverse? Momentum builds. Are all these people going to decide all of a sudden they're going back to their high tax jurisdictions? I don't think so. Next. I love this one. This shows the flow of assets under management out of New York and California. For the first time ever, Florida now has more assets under management than the state of Connecticut. And here we have a recent quote from Ken Griffin saying that he thinks that Miami represents the future of America and that we're building Wall Street South. And of course, those aren't just words. Recently in the press this week, we had his announcement that he's going in. He's proceeding on his $1 billion+ project in Brickell for his office building. So these are people who are aligning themselves with their words and people who've made fortunes out of perceiving trends and momentum before others do. The magic is in seeing the nascent change before others do, because again, most people are resistant to change. Next, this shows a map of new business filings. This is something that I'm very proud of for our city, and I think it's a very positive indicator. We lead the nation for per capita new business filings, and we also lead the nation in attracting young millennials who make a lot of money, who file over $200,000 a year. So again, these are both extremely forward-looking stats. This is not the Florida of old where people came to retire. This is a visualization of the entrepreneurial spirit reshaping and relocating and flowing to the paths of least resistance, which are no longer what they were in the 20th century. Next, so is Long Miami real, and where do we see the effects of it in our market? All right, what's been happening? On a Florida level, we have this great study from the Journal saying that the four of the top 10 hottest job markets in the country are now in the state of Florida. And then also, here's an interesting swap. Pre-COVID, 6 of the 10 priciest neighborhoods in America were in California. Now 7 of 10 are in Florida. Next, in our own markets, specific to Miami-Dade, I love to drill down on a price per square foot basis because that isolates for a new product at prime location. And this is where we see the largest spikes in transaction volume. And when you see spikes in data, that means something changed. There's a new reality going on. Single-family home sales past $2,000 a square foot in the first half of this year jumped 1,050% versus pre-COVID. That's over a 10x increase. And they were, what was it, over 80% cash. This pattern holds across our market. The higher up you go in value, the more we have a spike in transaction volume versus pre-COVID realities. This is because the wealth and talent migration wants new product at prime location. In the case of single-family homes, there's built-in scarcity because we can't add more inventory vertically. But these data points are shocking. And we had year-over-year spikes, year-over-year increases in most of these things, despite media tales of markets not doing well. Next, here's our cash matrix. We have a heavy cash market. The higher up you go in price, the more all cash it is. This is a great refute to any talk of bubble and froth because bubbles are not built on cash. Bubbles are usually built on misuse of easy money, of debt, over leveraging. This is not the case here. So next, another important point to recognize, our market is very much a tale of two markets. There's a segment that's attracting the wealth and talent, and then we have older segments that are performing a little bit differently. Most transactions happen at lower price points, so when the media talks about decreases in transaction volume, it's important to recognize that that's happening because of lower price points. So I have single-family home sales. They're down flat year over year, down 23% versus pre-COVID. However, past $1 million, we're up 154% versus pre-COVID, and in fact, we're up year over year. And for our single-family home market, every segment over $500,000 had year-over-year increases in transaction volume. And that is not the story being told by the press either, and that's all while we have less inventory than we did pre-COVID. And again, this is another floor to the market. This is shocking. Below $500,000, we've lost 87% of inventory in Miami-Dade County for single-family homes. It's just basically gone. That's the rising of the floor. Meanwhile, if we look at past, this is $500,000 to $1 million, look at this, record transaction volume in Q2 of this year, while inventory remains 7% lower than it was pre-COVID. So the press is going to say, oh, inventory is up 36% year over year, but they're not telling you that we have 166% more transactions versus pre-COVID, while inventory is still below where it was then. This is a far healthier, more robust market than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And again, up year over year. Next, is it still early days? This is the main part of our thesis we need to dig into. Does this still have room for growth and room for opportunities? So I talk a lot about momentum cycles building and the flow of taxpayers. It's important to recognize that in high tax jurisdictions, such as New York City, the top 1% of filers account for over 45% of tax revenue. You lose just 10% of those people, you have decimated your tax base. You feed budget gaps, and what happens is that politicians just increase their hostilities to capital. Why is that? Because they're only incentivized to get reelected, and they're going to keep pandering to the growing percentage that does not pay in. It's actually pretty obvious when you think of it that way. So here's an example of unintended consequences. In Bezos' home state of Washington, legislatures there introduced a tax on tradable net worth above $250 million. They targeted 5 people in the state. He was one of them. His portion would have accounted for 45%. He was on the hook for almost $1.5 billion should he have stayed. Well, he left. He came here. As we all know, he spent $250 million in Indian Creek, and he still has money left over for some more shopping. On the opposite end of this pattern, we have some data here from New York and California. I grew up in New York City, so I really don't find any joy in reporting this stuff. But New York challenged their census findings from last year, saying that while they lost population, they gained migrants. They're issuing these migrants, they're giving them prepaid free debit cards, as we all know. So while they lost taxpayer population, they gained migrant population to whom they're issuing prepaid debit cards. How do you think this ends? It does not end well. There's no upside to this scenario. Similarly, in the state of California, I mean, there's so many data points one can pick from California, but this one here shows that they actually stopped accounting for how they're spending all those millions of dollars they're allocating for the homeless. They just quite literally stopped accounting it. It's just gone. And their homeless situation, unfortunately, isn't getting better. They're not helping anybody. And this is just a negative loop. Meanwhile, they're hemorrhaging taxpayers. So this is an example of negative momentum. It is not going to reverse. There's no magic button anyone's going to press that's going to turn this around and all of a sudden have people with money flowing back to California. So how long will this last? And why does change accelerate at certain times? This is actually something that I've dug into a lot. We're going to start with another example of people that I consider the vanguard. In life, words are free. Anyone can say anything. But if you're going to model your actions or your life upon somebody, you should look at people who've actually been successful in something that you respect and follow their actions, not their words. And we have 2 prime examples here. We have Stephen Ross, and again, we have Ken Griffin, who've talked a whole lot about how much they like South Florida, but actually they're in it. They're following their own advice. They're fully committed, and news keeps coming in that they're doubling down, in fact, in many cases. And again, these are people that have made fortunes and built empires out of their abilities to perceive patterns and trends. So if I'm going to model my behaviors and belief systems, especially when it comes to where I line my life, I would believe them before I would believe some journalist in a feeder jurisdiction that's losing taxpayers, especially when said journalists very likely have socialist leanings, and the success that we're experiencing here is contrary to their own identity politics, which is how we get articles like that one in Newsweek. So this is a Venn diagram that I've been using at every presentation I've given since COVID. And this Venn diagram, this is on the topic of why change accelerates at certain times. So this Venn diagram has 3 circles. Each one represents a force. We have empire cycles, tech adoption, and war/pandemic. One alone is enough to usher in change. I've said before that we've in many ways lived in a post-World War II world, post-Bretton Woods world. Wars by themselves, what they do with restrictions of people, they usher in change. Tech adoption ushers in change. Think of what the Gutenberg printing press did for Europe. Well, we have the internet now. The internet was not always the fast, amazing thing that we have. Remember the dial-up? It came piecemeal, and it was incorporated into existing habits. COVID functioned like a war in what it did to the restrictions of people, and it broke habits long enough to allow the formation of new ones. And that's what I mean when I say it accelerated us into the 21st century. Empire cycles. This is what it is. Everything has a cycle, including the US empire. We're currently in a period of increased polarization, wealth gap, belief systems. We all see this. Whatever side you're on, this is true. Look at the electoral maps of how people vote. Look at the escalation of internal conflict in our nation. And to sort of prove this point, unfortunately, what do we have happen in rapid sequence? We had, for the first time ever, a former US president indicted of felonies. We had, less than 2 weeks after that, for the first time ever, a sitting president's child was convicted of a crime. And then, of course, recently there was the assassination attempt on former President Trump. Rapid order. And this, unfortunately, or it is what it is symptomatic of where we are in the internal disordination of our country. And now people are geographically realigning based upon their belief systems, too. So we're in the middle of this Venn diagram, is the main point that I've made, which is why I've had full confidence in saying that this is not going backwards. Next, this is actually the most important slide, because all of this information is great, but if you don't have the proper mindset, you can't avail yourself of it. You can't take advantage of it. School pretends to teach you things, but it does not even endeavor to teach you how to think. And how to think and how to position yourself in your mindset is the most important thing, or all the information is useless. So we're in a period of rapid change. First of all, we're very lucky to be in South Florida, so let's all have some gratitude for that, right? We're in one of the places to which the wealth and talent is flowing, and that is on an ascent and emerging, right? So we're already here. So now it's on us to train our minds so that we can position ourselves to align ourselves with this wealth and talent migration, right? So I have the great good luck, as many of you know, I train jiu-jitsu every day, about 2 to 4 hours, keeps me somewhat sane, and I train with one of the best teams in the world. And very few things distill down the importance and the power of the now and mindset like martial arts, like combat sports. We accept that you could train your body. Play a musical instrument, you're playing scales, you're training patterns of motion, right? Sports, you train reflexive responses so that your body reacts properly when it counts. The same is true for the mind. You train your mind to react just like you train your body. So imagine if you could train your mind to react, to define things as positives in real time, to believe in the inevitability of your own success so you could define things as positives in real time, and to filter out what doesn't matter, and most of it does not. It's actually quite binary. Things, people, thoughts, ideas are part of your path forward, or they are not. So if you can filter this in real time within the context that your success is inevitable, and that with your success is inevitable, that it's a positive, and that you are remaining strong throughout this fray, then given that we're already in South Florida, all of us here should be able to align ourselves to take advantage of the incoming wealth and talent migration, because it has just begun. Thank you. Oops, one moment. Find me here. All right, thank you, everyone.